Up next, we have our next speaker, Mr. Bahi, the Director of Solutions Engineering Networks. He will be presenting his keynote on unleashing the power of active cyber deception defense for multi-cloud architectures. Over to you, Mr. R.
Thank you, Simon. Thanks for having me, Shalini, and for the introduction. And I hope you can hear me and see my slides.
Yes, we can see you. We can see the presentation.
Okay, that's perfect. My name is Bahi. I'm heading the solution engineer across META region for Attivo Networks. And I'll be happy today, and it's my pleasure to talk a little bit about cyber deception in the cloud space, and as well as open your eyes about some of the really useful use cases that we believe they're going to help you tremendously to detect advanced cyber attacks targeting your cloud applications. So to start with, I will cover basically 4 points here. I'm going to touch a little bit on the threat landscape in the cloud infrastructure, and then talk about the value of cyber deception in your cloud deployments. Multi-cloud deployment could be Azure, could be AWS, could be GCP, or something else. And then what is the architecture of the cyber deception solution, basically, and how it can help us in really advanced use cases to detect those cyber attacks. So to start with the top cloud security challenges, as you know, people started moving to the cloud in the last couple of years, and I believe the cloud adoption have gone very high in the last 2 to 3 years, especially having cloud vendors like Microsoft or Amazon or Google investing in our regions and building their own data centers locally here in different countries, in different GCC countries, basically. So, but unfortunately, the legacy of applying cybersecurity policies and controls on the on-prem deployments still is really representing a challenge in securing our cloud applications, SaaS, PaaS, and so on. So there is still a misunderstanding from what I believe and what I see based on my customer interactions and experiences, that the shared responsibility of cloud security is really misunderstood. The customers, they think that the cloud vendor is 100% responsible for their application security and databases and storage, while the cloud vendors are giving full control on the security policies and other security controls to their customers to modify based on their needs. So there is, I think there is a gap, and there is a still misunderstanding, and there should be more of an awareness sessions and awareness campaigns from the cloud providers to their customers to make sure that we bridge that gap and we come to a common understanding. I also believe that the knowledge of cloud assets is not enough. Cloud assets are completely different than on-prem assets. Identities in the cloud, the privileged access in the cloud is completely different than what we have on-prem, and that really represents a huge challenge. That will also lead us that some of the security experts, they still rely on the processes the legacy processes, what I say, that maybe Peter have also shed some light in the previous speaker about using the old legacy processes into bringing in new applications and new technologies, which doesn't work at all with the cloud deployment. And identity management in cloud is completely different than on-prem. So the improper credential management, understanding, and access configurations, that will definitely lead to a massive cyber threats targeting our cloud infrastructures. So just to summarize, basically the complexity of the cloud deployment with low visibility, plus the large amount of sensitive data, sensitive applications, online services that our businesses are basically relying on, are resulting into that our cloud infrastructure is becoming the prime target for cyber attacks. How deception can help? Basically, deception brings the human factor into the cybersecurity protection for our cloud infrastructures. Again, I really second on what Peter mentioned in the previous sessions about relying on the technology only will never be something, will never make us successful. It has to be a combination between people, processes, and technologies together in order to create the best mix and match. So cyber deception brings the human factor into cybersecurity, especially that attackers or the bad guys are always using deception against us to apply social engineering techniques on the human beings, on the employees, sending phishing emails. This is also considered as deception. So the bringing deception to the defender's hands, or allowing the cybersecurity team or the SOC team who is managing the cloud security to look at their cloud infrastructures from an attacker's eyes to identify where are the misconfigurations, where are the lateral movement paths, where are the exposures, the lateral movement options, the exposed storage, exposed serverless applications, and so on, and then allows them to create a mesh of deceptive objects everywhere in the cloud to make them experience what are the real assets are experiencing in terms of reconnaissance activities, in terms of lateral movement, and so on. And normally the mesh of, or the deception mesh consists of different objects. Some of them are running as real target for those attackers, server-based applications, serverless applications in different cloud campaigns, deceptive objects on those VMs or cloud access keys, files and storage, and again, Office 365 is a great example of cloud applications, as well as the focus on the remote workforce. Attackers started targeting our credentials, our identities, our cloud access keys massively after the pandemic, because this is the only way to gain access to our cloud infrastructures. And they know that everyone, almost more than 90% of the employees, are working remotely from home, and if they are able to harvest their credentials or their cloud access keys, they will definitely get legitimate access to their data and their applications. So as I mentioned, the architecture of a cyber deception solution for our environment could be a mix of on-prem deceptive objects as well as cloud deceptive objects, including Active Directory on-prem or on cloud or on hybrid and so on. And Microsoft Azure AD is a great example. So you're basically offering with the deception architecture, you're basically offering the attackers something that they believe it's real, it's critical, and is going to help them reach their final destinations or gain access to whatever they are targeting as part of your infrastructures. And deception, or a proper cyber deception technology or deception solutions, should combine both a cyber deception strategy that is humanly created, then that should be a continuous discussion between the SOC team, the security team, and the business application guys, and a technology that allows them to apply that sort of deception in different layers of their infrastructures, on the network level, the cloud level, on the application, on the files, on the data, as well as on the user side. So creating those kind of deceptive objects everywhere in the network, on-prem or cloud, servers or desktops or OT, IoT devices. In the cloud, we're talking about functions, serverless, storage blobs, and so on. So that will provide the SOC team with better visibility on what their real assets are experiencing right now, basically. And that will alert them at the early stage of the attack cycle if there is any misuse of the cloud access keys or the cloud credentials, or there is unauthorized access to any cloud resources from different locations and so on. I'm going to take you through a couple of examples or a couple of use cases, deception use cases. I'm going to focus on Microsoft Azure in those examples, since it's commonly used in region. And I'm gonna really open your eyes on how those deception use cases are going to help you early detect those malicious activities or the presence of malicious actors in our network. So the first one, I'm going to talk about the use of deceptive or interactive Office 365 accounts in the deception environment. So basically what we are going to do here is create deceptive or alert on the use of inactive Office 365 accounts. Those employees, maybe they left the company and they are unhappy, or injecting a deceptive Office 365 accounts on the user machines that are accessing the Office 365 applications to use email and so on. So basically, the detection of such a use is a clear indication that there is someone who is trying to harvest credentials or trying to use old accounts that are currently inactive because the employee left the organizations already. But it's an evidence, at the end of the day, it's an evidence that someone is trying to misuse those credentials and is trying to gain unauthorized access to our cloud infrastructures or our online cloud email infrastructures and so on. So this is a good way or a very efficient way in detecting such activities. And normally the harvesting the credentials or using the stolen credentials is one of the early stage attack techniques that attackers will be using to do a privilege escalations and gain access before they reach to their final destination. So knowing this activity at that time, it's really useful to open your eyes, the security team's eyes about some misconfigurations or some malicious activities happening in different activities. Active Directory, whether it's an on-prem AD or a cloud AD, Azure AD, or a hybrid sync between the on-prem and the cloud is very important. And recently, the Active Directories have been massively targeted by those bad guys, advanced attackers, to harvest the privileged accounts, domain admins and enterprise admins, so they can gain the maximum privilege within your infrastructures and then use those to dominate the whole environment and gain access to whatever they want. They can create accounts, they can delete accounts, they can reset passwords and so on. So basically focusing on protecting your Active Directory deployment using deception is, I believe, is very important. How to do that? Basically create cyber deception policies to counter the deception techniques that and the social engineering techniques that the attackers are using to harvest credentials from the Active Directory. So basically monitor those malicious queries targeting your domain controllers and try to alert on those queries. And if those queries are hitting your domain controllers and the responses are sent back to the compromised machines or to the attacker machine, then we basically need to find a way on how to hide the real objects, the real domain controllers, the real privileged accounts, domain admins and enterprise admins and critical service accounts, and to provide the attacker with something, an alternative answer, something deceptive that will lead him to some decoy assets or deceptive assets, functions, servers, VMs, or whatever, to really do an engagement and gather the TTPs about that specific attack. So this is again, it's gonna be very, very useful. The protection of files and folders and storage drives is, I believe, is very, very important, especially when it comes to the recent ransomware 2.0 or APT-like ransomware attacks that are targeting our organizations. And basically one of the bad scenarios that everyone could expect is that you have a compromised machine with OneDrive storage locations or folders. And when the ransomware tries to encrypt those locations, the next backup cycle in the cloud, then your Office 365 accounts and OneDrive backed up files in the cloud will also be encrypted. So the employees or the organizations will be left without any backup of their data. So with deception, so will basically you'll be able to apply policies to alert on unauthorized access to those locations, as well as provide the attacker with an alternative target deceptive SMB shares, deceptive files and folders that if he touch or he tries to access, number one, there will be an alert. Number two, the real data and the files will be completely hidden and only deceptive data will be shown to the attacker. And that's again another clear indication, and it's an evidence-based activity that the SOC team will be aware of at a very early stage of the attack cycle, while making sure that your production files and folders and cloud storage are completely safe and 100% away from the attacker activities. Continuing with the decoy files, we can go even with deception further than just protecting the real files and giving the attacker something else to play with. We can also tag those files and make them as a decoy files. So if those files are accessed inside the network or exfiltrated outside the network, a notification with full counterintelligence details will be provided to the security team, telling them who is trying to attack you, who is trying to breach your data, who is trying to target you, from which country, from which attacker group. And that intelligence is really important to be shared among the other security controls, so they can know that this specific public IP is basically a bad IP that should be blocked at the perimeter level and shouldn't be allowed to access our cloud resources or cloud infrastructure. The last use case I'm going to talk about is basically about identity. Again, I'm repeating identity because identity entitlement, to be honest, in the cloud is one of the major misunderstanding that we need to know. Everyone is used to identities, credentials as part of the Active Directory, where users and accounts and administrators will have permissions on a specific set of assets or data or server or services within the infrastructures. That thing is completely different in the cloud. It's not about users or accounts or administrators. I mean, VMs can have permissions, applications can have permissions, and those extra permissions that are given to those applications without having really visibility or a proper evaluation on are their permission are really too much for that specific applications to work or not. So in other words, maybe I have an application that requires only 2 permissions to access the database and to access Active Directory. But by default, when you create the applications, the cloud provider will offer 10 extra permissions on that applications. And those basically will represent or will make the attack surface wider and wider. And without having a proper visibility and a continuous evaluation of what are the permissions, entitlements being given to those users, applications, and VMs, we won't be able to reduce that attack surface. And we will end up having, again, problems, cybersecurity issues, people who are having access to different areas in the cloud infrastructures that they shouldn't have to, and that imagine that one of those users or one of those machines got compromised, then the same permissions are now in the attacker's hand, and the attacker will be using those permissions to really do bad things to your infrastructures and applications. So basically, that's what I wanted to bring to you today. And again, thanks for having me. It was my pleasure being here. And if there is any extra time, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you so much, Bahi. However, we have a very trending question, I would say, for you from one of our audience members. The question is, despite the massive investments in cybersecurity prevention solutions such as firewalls, intrusion prevention systems, and SIEM, cyber attacks and breaches are on the rise still. What do you attribute the reason for that?
As I started my presentation with, relying on technology only is not going to help us all the way. It's helpful to a certain extent, but we need to combine the human factor, the awareness of the employees into the cybersecurity strategies that we are applying. And I believe cyber deception is one of the technologies that brings that. Just a quick example to link the dots here. One of the main attack vectors in all the data breaches that we hear, more than 70 to 80%, involve credential theft. And credential theft is a social engineering technique. It is not about a technology that could prevent a user to, by mistake or by being applying social engineering techniques on him to give his credentials to the wrong guys and so on. So it's about the human, the awareness, not only technology. So we need to combine both together.
Okay. Thank you so much for answering that question, Bahi. We really appreciate that. And thank you so much for your time and presentation. It was quite insightful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.